In this video, we'll take a look at how to write a program that uses methods to pass data back and forth. There are a couple of things I like to say when I'm recording one of these sort of solution walkthrough videos. One is that I don't think you get a whole lot out of sitting there watching a recording of me typing out source code. I think you learn a lot by giving it a shot yourself. So what I encourage students to do is pause the video, take a look at the problem, and try your best to solve it. And then when you get stuck, or if you get stuck, you can come back here and watch how I solve the problem and see if that helps. The other thing I like to point out is that I don't rehearse these videos ahead of time. I just hit record and I start working on the code. I make lots of mistakes and I don't edit them out because I want students to see that even experienced programmers make mistakes, and often I make very stupid mistakes, or what you might think of as stupid mistakes. That's the way programming is for most people. I think there are some people that the code just magically pops out of their head, but not me. So with that said, I'm going to give you a moment to pause the video and try and solve this. I do want to point out that the concepts we're really looking for here are parameters and returns. So you're going to want to use those in your solution. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jump into solving this problem. So I'll switch over to Visual Studio Code. I'm going to show some of this initial setup because you may still be getting the hang of how Visual Studio Code works. So I don't have a folder open. By default, it has open whatever you were working on last time. The folder I want is actually right there, but just as a reminder, you can always go File, Open Folder. You're going to navigate to wherever your course folder is and open that. It should show you a source folder and then all of your subfolders if you've been directed to set up your course this way, of course. I'm going to be working in, for this video, I'm going to be working in Module 3. So I'm going to create a new file. This problem tells me that I should name this percentages. So I will just take that name, percentages.java, and the .java lets code know that this is a Java program. And before I get too far along and forget, I'm going to go ahead and do my package statement and my class statement. So remember, the package needs to, for our understanding of it at this point, it just needs to match the folder name. So module 3 in this case. And then I'm going to have a class statement, and the class needs to match the file name. So percentages, like that. So just I like to do that right off the bat, so I make sure that I name those correctly. I can see no signs of an error on this code so far. And then before I forget, I do want to take care of, for my classes at least, the kind of the comment block at the top. And to save you from watching me type it, I've just got a copy and paste of it over here. So obviously do whatever your instructor is requiring of you, but this is what I'm doing for this one. And I have a spot for test cases, so I'll linger on that for just a moment. Test cases are where we plan out the values we're going to use to test our code when we are done with it, or when we believe we're done with it, so that we can tell if it works the way it's supposed to work. It is important that these are done, that you come up with your test cases before you start writing the code. When I grade these, I have no way of knowing, of course, and I'm sure that many students just write their program, then they type in the numbers and they use the output of the program to come up with their test cases. That really defeats the purpose. There's no sense of, why bother even doing it, I guess, except for the points on the rubric. But the idea here is that it does two things. In addition to giving us a way to test our code, it also forces us to think through what the code needs to do, because we can't write a code to make this calculation if we don't understand how the calculation works. And so in this case, the problem as it's worded gives us one test case, so I'm going to steal that one. It says if we give it 2.0 and 5.0, that's 40%. In other words, 2 is 40% of 5. And I put the dot zeros on there because we're talking about double data types. And then the directions say, although their example doesn't follow this through, the example says then you should reverse those numbers and call it again. And so if I reverse those, then I get that 5.0 is 250.0% of 2.0. And those numbers seem right. I do need to come up with two more, and again, to save you the time of watching me fumble through math, which I'm not very good at, I did do these ahead of time. And so my first one is a real easy one that I could do at least partly in my head, because I know that 8.2 is 82% of 10. Then I had to use a calculator to do the reverse. And then I came up with some wacky numbers that I just made up. And again, I used the calculator. It's not that you have to be able to do the test cases in your head. You just need to understand the process. So I need to understand that if I divide 2.0 by 5.0, that gives me 0.4, and then I have to multiply it times 100 to get it to say 40%. So I've worked out the steps as I did that. And one last kind of setup or housekeeping chore here is this main method. And at this point in the course, hopefully this is starting to become, maybe you remember part of this from memory, but you probably still are looking up how to type this. And I can't type it while I'm talking. So there we go. Public static void main string args. Again, eventually you'll have that memorized. And the way the problem is worded, it says that it wants our main method to have, so I take the directions very literally, and that's how I write my directions too, just as an aside here. It says that the main method should hold two double variables, so I'm going to come up with those. Call it first number, and I'm going to say first number equals 2.0. I'm just stealing that from my test case. And second number equals 5.0, which is the other part of my test case. Now the directions say that I'm supposed to then get user input, but what I recommend for beginning programmers is that don't worry about the input, do that last. I can get this code all working just by setting up initial values of my own, and then I can go back after everything else is done and I can just change those to be numbers that are input. And in fact, to remind me of that, I'm going to some of you have seen me do this in other videos or in lectures in class. I like to kind of organize my source code a little bit for most of these problems. So, I'm going to, up here, I'm going to declare my variables, whatever variables I'm going to need. Then I'm going to say get input and complete my calculations. And I'm going to output my results. So it's just a little reminder that those are the three basic steps that I think of when I'm solving these kinds of problems. So I have those two variables that I'm going to need to hold the numbers that'll eventually be input. And then I need to pass those numbers to a method and get kind of a percent. What is the percentage of, the first number is a percentage of the second number, and then the reverse. So that's two more variables to store my results. I can also sort of tell this by looking at my test cases. It doesn't always work this way, but in this case, so far, I have two inputs, so I have two variables there, and then I have two results or two outputs, and so I'm going to have two corresponding variables there too. So I'll call it first percent. And for now, I'm going to set it to negative 1.0. That's -1 is just a nice kind of default value where if I see a 0 in my code when I run it, I might not be sure, did it calculate to 0 or was that just what it was initialized to? But now if I see a -1 or really any negative number, I'm going to have a better sense of what's going on. So second percent equals negative 2.0. So that's all the variables I need for now. I may decide as I'm working that I need more, and I can come back up here and just add those in. And I just mentioned I'm going to skip the input. So the next step, really, if I've got my two numbers, my first number and second number, is I have to calculate those percentages. Now, of course, I could just do the calculation right here. But what we're trying to show you with methods is that we can organize our code and we can kind of encapsulate parts of our code into a separate method that then we can reuse whenever we need it. So since we're going to call this, we're going to do this calculation twice, that's a good reason to think, well, maybe I should just make a method out of it instead of just doing the math in main. It's also a good idea because that's where your points come from on this assignment probably. So I'm going to define another method out here. So a couple things. I'm making sure, and VS Code gives me this color coding to help. So the yellow represents the class, and the purple or magenta or whatever that is represents the method. So if I'm going to make another method, I can't put a method inside of another method. So I can't have a method declared right here. It has to be outside of the first method, but it still has to be part of the class. So I'm going to put it right there. I'm going to declare it as public. I don't really know what that means at this point in my programming career. And it's going to be static. I also don't necessarily know what that means yet, although we will learn. And then a name for the method. And the name should be a verb, usually. And it should reflect what the method does, what it calculates. And so in this, I said it should be a verb, and I think I'm going to break that rule immediately. And I also skipped a step that I need to first declare what the return type is. So our main method has a return type of void. That means it doesn't return a value. But this one needs to do a calculation and then give back an answer. And that answer is going to be a double. And again, I can confirm that by looking at my test cases that I'm going to need a double to be able to handle some of these results. So public static double, and I'll just call this one percentage. I see that VS Code is recommending that name for me. I don't, I'll use that for now, and that's fine. And I'm going to, it's again shaded purple or magenta because this is another method. And I'm getting an error, by the way, because as it's, I don't know if I can get it to pause on that pop-up, because if I have a return type that's not void, then my method won't compile unless I have a return statement that works with that return type. So I'm going to, well, I guess I'll just solve that. This is another thing that I often like to do just as a working step with new programmers, because you want your code to compile. You don't want to go for any length of time with code that's broken if you can avoid it. So now at least it compiles. This method, in order to calculate a percentage, I need to know two things. I essentially need to know the numerator and the denominator, right? I need those numbers because a percentage basically is a fraction. So any information that we need in a method that isn't already in the method has to be passed over to it as a parameter or an argument. And I'm going to use those two terms interchangeably for the time being. So I need to declare two arguments for this method. I'm going to have a double, and I could call it first number. I don't like that name because it's identical to a variable I've already declared. It works. Java doesn't care that they're identical because they're in different places. But it's confusing to the reader, and it's probably confusing to new programmers. So I might call this one num1. These are not great variable names. I like them to be more descriptive, but the problem doesn't give me any more context. It just says they're two numbers. I could call them numerator and denominator, like I mentioned, but I'll just go with num1 and num2. And now within this method, I'm going to need a value that I'm going to return, and so I'm going to create a variable here called percent. And again, as always, I'll initialize it to -1, and since it's a double, that'll be -1.0. And incidentally, now I can change this because that percent is really going to be my result that I'm calculating. And now all that's left is the math. How do I assign the correct value to this percent variable? So it's going to be an assignment statement. On the left of my equal sign is where I'm putting the result, and on the right is the is whatever value I'm saving, I'm assigning, and it could be a literal, it could be a method return, it could be a calculation, all kinds of potential options here. But the idea here is to calculate a percentage. I'm going to say num1 divided by num2. Now this may or may not be correct at this point, but I don't know because if I run my code, there's nothing visible. So I'm going to sort of pause here and go up and use this method and output it so I can see if it's working correctly. So I'm going to skip the get input, and then I'm going to do the calculations. I'm going to say first percent equals, and now I got to call this method. I need to say, well, I want first percent to be whatever the result is, whatever the return is from this method. So percentage, and it's going to have parentheses on it. Parentheses always mean a method in Java and many programming languages. So anytime I am referring to a method, I got to have parentheses, even if they're empty. And anytime I want to call a method on anytime I see parentheses in my code, I know that we're talking about a method. So first number, second number. Now I'm getting an error here too because it's saying I don't have this doesn't work because percentage requires 2 parameters and I'm only given it 1. I assume that's what the error says. Yep, it says we need a double and a double. You're just giving me a double. So I do have to give it both numbers. It won't compile until I do that. So that is going to say with an assignment statement, it evaluates whatever's on the right. So it's going to it's going to jump down to the percentage method, and it's going to pass in first number and second number. And down here, we're going to refer to those as num1 and num2, because if I say first number in this place, in this method, it doesn't recognize that. This is a concept that we call method, or that we call scope. So first number lives between this curly brace and that one, and I can't refer to it anywhere else. It's sort of isolated from the rest of the world. And same thing up here, I can't refer to num1 and num2 because those are isolated down in this other method. So that's why we use parameters, is we're going to pass these numbers down into our method and use them there, and then we're going to use a return statement to give back a result. Okay. And then I'll do, well, I'm not even going to do second one first. I'm going to do my print line statement. So system out print line. Just label this as my result so I don't get confused in my output window down there, my terminal. So I'm going to say that first number is whatever percent, first percent. I'll use the little percent sign of my second number. So that's a kind of a clunky looking line of code. As we get better with Java, we'll learn how we might write this out a little better or use some different techniques to get that output looking easier to read. And now I'm going to test this and see what I got. So hopefully I get no errors. I'm going to open up my terminal down here. And so it's hard to see on the video, I'm guessing, but it says that my result is 2.0 is 0.4% of 5.0. And if I look, that's close, but it's not right. When we divide two numbers to get like this, we get a decimal and not really a percentage. The way that we talk about percentages is we really are moving the decimal point over 2 spots. So if instead of 0.4, if I had 40, then that would be correct. And so the way we do that, I'll use order of operations just to demonstrate it. So it doesn't matter in this problem. It shouldn't matter in multiplication and division work. But I'm going to use parentheses just like in math class to say, okay, we're going to do that first, and then we're going to multiply that times 100. And I'll run it again. And now I've got 2.0 is 40% of 5.0. So so far that works. My test case says that it also needs to then do the reverse. 5.0 is 250.0% of 2.0. So now I'm going to do second percent equals percentage. Now this time I'm going to go second number, comma, first number. So order counts when we're dealing with parameters. Passing in 2.0 and then 5.0 is not the same as passing in 5.0 and then 2.0 because they get associated, they get placed into these different variables down here, and I'm using them in different ways. So it's part of the point of the way this problem was written, I think, was to show you that order counts. And then I'm gonna I'll cheat here again since I'm doing a video, and I need to output that other result and say, I'll just change all these to second number, second percent. Oops, yep, second percent, and then change this one to say first number. And I'll run it and see what we get. So now I get 2.0 is 40% of 5.0, and 5.0 is 250% of 2.0. So my first test case passes. All right, that means I'm in really good shape. I'm going to pause the video and take a drink here. All right, and that was just water in case that statement sounded funny. I just needed to get some water in my throat because I got a dry mouth from talking. After work, maybe I'll drink something else. All right, so like I said, I'm in really good shape here. My code seems to work. It passed the first test case. And so I have two different ways I could approach this. I could now modify these numbers with my different test cases and just confirm that my math is indeed working correctly. There's a reason we do 3 test cases, because sometimes it'll pass some and not others. And there's an art to designing good test cases that for now we're just anything is good, but later you'll get better at test cases that accurately test the quality of your program. So I could do that, or I could at this point do my input. And I think I'll do my input mostly because I'm worried that I'm going to forget if I don't. So this part's not that important, but it bothers me. So I'm going to set those back to default values. I don't know why I did -2 up there. I didn't mean to, because I was probably saying second number. Okay, so now in order to do this, I need another variable. You may not think of it as a variable, but I need a scanner object in order to get input, and that is a variable. So I'm going to declare that or define that right up here. Scanner, I like to call mine input. Sometimes it doesn't matter what the name is, right? But I'm going to call it input equals new scanner, and this is going to be system.in because we're getting stuff from the input buffer. And I've got this error because it doesn't know what scanner is, and so I need an import statement to tell it how to find it. I'll put that right up under my package. I believe that's java.util.scanner. I don't like the dot star, like that wildcard, to just take all of util. I prefer when we just take the pieces we want. Java now, the compiler, it's a silly distinction because the compiler will, I believe, the compiler will only import the ones that it actually needs if I do a star. But I like to, this way the reader can tell exactly what I need that import statement for. Okay, so now my line of code works. I've got this little warning because I'm not doing anything with it, but I can fix that. So I'm going to say first number. Oh, I need to prompt the user first. So system.out.print. I won't do print line this time. I'll do print. Say enter the first number, and I'll have a space there because otherwise the cursor will be jammed right up against the end of that. And now I'll say first number equals input dot next double. I have to make sure I use the right method here. And again, next double has parentheses, so I know I'm talking about a method. I don't know how next double works because it exists in this scanner class somewhere, but that's how I use it. And now I'm going to prompt for the second number. And same thing, second number equals input dot. And by the way, I'm hitting tab if I like what autocomplete is suggesting. Microsoft always has to name things themselves. They call it IntelliSense, I believe. I can just hit tab to take that. Okay, so I think now I have some user interface and some input here. So let's see if that works. Again, hard to see on the video. I keep forgetting to expand the font size there. Enter the first number. I'll use my well, I'll stick with the first test case to make sure I didn't break anything. 2.0, 5.0, just like it worked before. I think probably I'm done. So all that's left now is to run through my test cases and make sure that they all work. And this is what I was talking about earlier at the beginning of the video, that you can get away with writing your test cases now. Like I could put in two numbers, get the result, and then put that up and then go up to my test cases and type it. It doesn't do you any good. You don't learn anything by that. And I mean, some people just want to get the grade, and so I guess that doesn't matter. But if you're in here trying to learn how to be a good programmer or trying to learn how to be a programmer at all, you might as well do it right. So that's my little lecture for the day. Okay, 0.65. Okay. My test cases are, no, they did not pass. What did I do wrong there? Oh, I typed it on that last one. I typed it in backwards, actually. Interesting. So I flipped them. So if I had done it correctly, I think it would have worked. 17.23, 54.65. I was talking while I was doing this, and I sort of lost my train of thought. Okay, the last thing I'll point out is, if you can see it, I've got a really obnoxious number in my result. I've got all this decimal data that we would want to round off, probably. Rounding is not part of what we've learned yet, and it's something I honestly don't really care much about, because that's for situations like this, because it's really just a user interface issue, and I don't care much about that. I'm just trying to teach you how to write the code. So if you know how to round it off in a problem like this, you're welcome to do so. I would encourage you, if you're a beginning programmer, just leave it like that. It's fine. So I think this video is complete. If you have any questions or are having trouble with a similar kind of problem, just let me know.